Over at DC Comics, the publisher has taken a big swing over with the Green Lantern franchise as the Guardians of Oa have recently gone missing. In their place, the United Planets have taken control of the Corps, and one of their first acts of business was assigning Sector 2814 as a hostile threat over to the rest of the universe. In response, our leading man, Hal Jordan, ended up quitting the Guardians and headed back to Earth of Sector 2814. But little does Hal know that a DC villain known as Insomnia has recently ensnared the DC Comics universe into their nightmares in search of the Nightmare Stone. My name is Arako Braddock, and today, let's go ahead and celebrate the continuation of some of the plot threads in the main Green Lantern title over in DC's Night Terrors Green Lantern #1. But before we get deeper into the video, I want to go ahead and encourage you to consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button if you enjoy our content. Without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our solicitation text behind Night Terrors Green Lantern #1. Back in space to face his greatest fear, something is wrong in Sector 2814. And Hal Jordan, Kilowog, and a few other lanterns must find the mysterious disturbance. Despite a ban on any of Earth's Green Lanterns leaving their world, what they discover is a planet controlled by a familiar face. The face of Hal's greatest fear. And in a backup story, Sinestro finds himself thrust into a new reality that drags him into the darkest corners of his past and perhaps the future. Want to introduce our creative team behind Night Terrors Green Lantern. This first story is called Doorway to Death, written by Jeremy Adams, featuring art from Eduardo Pansica, inks from Julio Ferreira, colors from Luis Guerrero, letters from Dave Sharpe, and we have a cover for the issue coming in directly from Lucio Parrillo. Here's a look over at Lucio Parrillo's really triumphant cover showing Hal Jordan extending his jaw a little bit too far, in my opinion. And I want to go ahead and extend a big thank you over to Adventures in Poor Taste for posting these previews of all these Night Terrors books so quickly over at DC Comics. And I want to go ahead and spend just a few moments focusing in over on the artwork from Eduardo Pansica throughout the issue. I was really struck by some of Pansica's artwork throughout the tale, really found that he had a striking resemblance over to some previous Green Lantern artists that I really like. This kind of third panel that we have up on the screen in particular really reminded me strongly of Ivan Heiss, but there's also a great sense of kind of kinetic energy throughout some of these pages as well, which also led me to recall some of the work that Jeff Johns contributed alongside artist Doug Mahnke over on their Green Lantern run, especially when we get deeper into this issue and experience more of the Night Terrors kind of horror undertones throughout the tale. But very similar to what Doug Mahnke was able to capture. Really appreciate the fact that Pansica is able to really illustrate some of these facial expressions on the various characters throughout the issue. And also, I think some of these page compositions really help sell the emotion in some of these stories, given that this is a sort of nightmare-esque storyline within Hal's life. Some of these kind of frayed page expressions are a great way to create some kind of natural tension over in the story that leads to some really great moments in terms of some of the artwork throughout the series. I love this page that we have up on the screen just as an example, as we have somebody kind of exiting the casket here, and watching young Hal's reaction to this with such a precise expression delivered over from Pansica, I think really helps this issue bring out something special in terms of the artwork alone. And in terms of the scripting here, I was a really big fan of what Jeremy Adams had the chance to contribute over to this tale. One thing that I know a lot of people have reservations about in regards to Night Terrors is the fact that for some of these books, they have to kind of stop some of the prose and plot threads that they were working with. Thankfully, Jeremy Adams has a bit of a different approach over to Night Terrors Green Lantern by focusing in directly on the moment where we left off with Hal in the last issue, as Hal was essentially inserting himself in the middle of his ex-girlfriend Carol and her new fiance Nathan's business. So it was really intriguing to kind of get such a strong emotional change in terms of the tone of the storyline. But still, I really appreciate the fact that Adams just went ahead and essentially made this issue a more twisted version of what the next month's Green Lantern issue would have looked like in this storyline. In terms of the kind of next steps and how this book leads into Knightterrors, I was also a big fan of how Adams really naturally kind of progressed Hal into a more nightmare-based story throughout this tale. One of the big things that Adams does over in the story is de-age Hal in certain moments as he reacts to key moments throughout his life. I think this approach to some of the scripting really brought out some of my emotions throughout the story and helped some of this material land much stronger than if Hal was an adult throughout kind of this whole narrative over in the issue as well. And I really appreciated that this issue, very similar to Knightterrors Batman, also went ahead and took on the origin of Hal Jordan and kind of twisted it in a very interesting way here. Also appreciated some of the characters that were introduced in this storyline, and one of the newest and most interesting aspects about this current Green Lantern run is that new status quo in terms of the Guardians. And I was actually hoping that we would get to see, Jeremy Adams able to comment on some of those new elements of the book with the Guardians gone missing. Thankfully, in the very last couple pages, we get some of that status quo referenced, and it's sort of turned on its head in a really interesting way. Also, the final couple pages of this issue delves deep into Hal's backstory, and we get to see one of the most harrowing aspects of Hal's past brought right to the forefront of the series. So really appreciate the kind of pacing of the script that Jeremy Adams lent to the story, as well as some of that incredibly precise artwork from Eduardo Pansica in the tale. And I want to go ahead and talk about this second story in the collection. This one is called Shards from the Looking Glass Part 1. This one is written by Alex Segura, featuring art from Mario Foccillo, colors from Prasad Rad, and letters from Dave Sharpe. So in terms of the Shards from the Looking Glass tale, this is really, I think, what we've been waiting for across these last couple issues of Green Lantern. We've seen numerous moments of Sinestro kind of peeking behind the surface of the issue. I was so curious to see what his kind of new status quo would be and to go ahead and catch up with him. Alex Segura finally gets the chance to flesh out where Sinestro has been throughout this storyline, and also gets a chance to kind of segue him into the Knightterrors story as well. And kind of catching up with Sinestro over in Coast City is especially foreboding in this tale. It feels like Sinestro is really down on his luck and is trying to establish any kind of semblance of, his honor and his past throughout the storyline. I was especially struck at that moment in this issue where Sinestro goes and tries to activate his ring but is unable to. I thought that was a great visual element over from Mario Foccillo. I really appreciated the sort of transition into the Knightterrors backdrop as the story kind of starts out with Sinestro in plain clothes walking through Coast City and segues into a really harrowing nightmare direction. Really appreciate some of the detail that Foccillo lends over to these sequences, especially in terms of the final 2 or 3 pages. I was really taken by some of the visual representation of Sinestro's past in the story. Really appreciated how we got that call out to him being a part of the kind of Dark Army over in Dark Crisis, and to see how that sort of negatively affected his headspace, and found the final page of the issue to be so intriguing and something that I'm definitely going to be interested in checking out next month. So in terms of Knightterrors Green Lantern, I think that this book is really going to help readers get interested into the next era of Green Lantern without having to worry of the narrative stopgap that Knightterrors poses for some titles. The fact that we went right from the last moments of Green Lantern 2 in Knightterrors Green Lantern really helped establish the fact that this book is going to be essential to the greater Green Lantern narrative. Being able to finally get the chance to witness what Sinestro's been up to has been absolutely thrilling. and I found the backstory referenced and some of his current turmoil to be incredibly compelling. Very excited to see Sinestro reintroduced back into the main Green Lantern series at some point, and to see how Knightterrors Green Lantern wraps up. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming to check out our video over on Knightterrors Green Lantern. We'll be back to cover everything Knightterrors and Green Lantern related over in the near future. Thank you so much for coming to check out our content, and I'll see you soon. Bye.